So I'm going to call the meeting to order. Shelby, please call the roll.
Ham. Here. Toohill. Esty. Flournoy.
Here.
Gandy.
Yes.
Kness. Rowe.
Here.
So I just want to point out we do have a quorum. There are 4 of our 7 council members here, and not sure about the others if they'll still show up or not, but we can move forward. So today we're here to talk about and consider our proposed tax levy for this next coming fiscal year. And before I open the public hearing where you can come to the podium and talk to the council, I am going to have Doug give us a brief history of where we're at and talk about the levy currently, where it's going, rollback, valuations. So Doug, go ahead.
So our current tax levy is at 16.68565 per 1,000. The proposal is to 17.65066, which is a 90.965 cent increase. The reason why this proposal is for the increase in operating supplies, increase to gas and electric, and an increase to property insurance, which has jumped up to 30%. We also have the construction of the fire station, the Sunrise Trail, the North Campus Ridge, and inflation, tariffs, and we already discussed that. There is some confusion. There is a rollback on that we get valuated on is with a $100,000 property, we're only assessed on 47.4316% of that valuation. And there is some confusion that everybody got. This is my personal one, and I'm a taxpayer as well, that there is some confusion with this letter of truth. And yes, it is alarming to see that. If you look at the scenarios that the state gives us, that it is a hypothetical example, and they have a 100,000 in the current year and assessing it 110,000 for residential, and then they have a hypothetical for 300,000 for commercial to $330,000. Now, having multiple discussions with legislatures and our financial advisors, that it does look like everything is extremely inflated, and the levy itself is going up 5.8% rather than the 20% or the 19% that it says. And there's actually some good articles kind of explaining this, but if you're in the trenches all day, every day, it's still confusing. But, you know, this is the reason why we're at.
Can I ask you? So you're saying property tax increase is 5.8%.
Yes.
The example on the other side was kind of confusing. It's going.
You said the levy went up 5%.
The levy.
But it does not mean your taxes go up 5%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Depends on valuation.
Okay.
Yeah.
It depends on rollback.
Right.
Yeah.
So rollback will, again, he's mentioned it's currently at about 47.5%. They'll get the new rollback in October, approximately 2025. And so we don't know what it's going to be for next year.
Okay.
And primarily that, you know, the assessments, this sort of scenario can happen primarily with brand new construction, and again with tariffs, and I can just tell you that I was at the lumberyard this weekend, and they can't get 2x4s right now. I was shocked. And this is not a political statement. It is the reality that we're living in. But as prices increase, we have to make sure that we still have functional service delivery. And, you know, the cost of construction, rehabilitation, and operation has increased. But we still try to keep those costs as low as we possibly can. And that's where we stand.
Yeah. Did that answer your question, Paul?
It did. So the examples on the back of that, your property tax statement, are hypotheticals, but they're not close to what the reality is.
Right.
Okay. That's
And
what I
they
want.
don't consider the rollback either.
They don't consider rollback. Okay.
That is also correct.
Because it hasn't been determined yet. So
It hasn't, yes.
Yeah. Okay,
What's the
so
whispering around at the legislature for the rollback? Any hints?
I don't know. But, you know, they are trying to keep property taxes within a certain growth rate. You know, they have that allowable growth of
3%.
3%. So, you know, that's what they're trying to do. And we heard loud and clear in January that property taxes are still a very significant issue for them. And that's, you know, where a lot of their focus is. So, and that's all I'm going to say. So, with that, I will open the public hearing, and I would ask that if you want to come to the podium, please state your name and what ward you live in. You can state your address if you like, but you don't have to, but please state the ward you're in. And also, if you can keep your comments to about 3 minutes, because there may be multiple people that want to speak. And so, so again, I'll open the public hearing, and who would like to speak? Mary?
Hi, my name's Mary Carter. I've lived here since 1983. We now live outside the city limits, but I'm very involved in the city, you know, in terms of my attention and the quality of life that we're providing as we, you know, want to keep our community thriving. So first of all, what is a rollback? What did you mean by that? I didn't understand.
So that means
specifically what.
Okay, so if your property is assessed at $100,000, if you go to the assessor site, you go,
Yeah.
oh, my house is $100,000. You're actually only paying tax on about $47,500. You're not paying tax on the full $100,000.
So is this always every year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand what you meant by that.
Yep.
So my biggest observation is waste. I see waste all around me. I grew up in a large family and we didn't waste. You left the room, you turned off the light, you used everything up, you didn't just waste. So when I see waste, it's very difficult for me to justify my paying taxes for things. So what I'd like to know, and I'll go back and sit down and just let us know what you are doing to reduce waste, what you have put your attention on to reduce expenses by eliminating waste, what
Okay.
you've seen.
Fair question. You want to address that, Doug?
Absolutely. So I agree with that statement that we operate frugally. And, you know, we identify, it can be very boring to go through some of the contracts that we have with people. But we have to make sure that we're getting the best deals because we pay other people to provide services as well. But we have to think about our fuel costs. We have to think about, we run our equipment until they're past their useful life. And typically we don't buy new unless we're mandated. And so let's say that we have a city truck that you see driving down the street. We are not allowed to just purchase a vehicle from anybody. We have to make sure that we're getting the best price. If we do have to buy brand new, then we have to put it out for bid. But if we're buying used, we have to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples and getting the best deal. We'll drive a city truck for 20, 25 years sometimes. Now, again, a fire truck, they are recommended to take out of service after 20 years, and they are mandated that we have to take them out of service after 25 years. A fire truck is almost $2 million, $1.8 million. And so we put money back because we just don't get to go out and buy a used fire truck or a used squad car. But we actually we have a spending policy that all of those things have to be accounted for of how we do business, and that anybody can come in, and any citizen, they can come into our office and we will show them our budgets and what we're spending things on. But we try to get every drop of useful service out of everything that we do. You can go into my office right now, look at my office chair. It's falling apart, but we don't replace it because we would rather spend something on someone else. It's the same thing with, City Hall, our buildings. We try to maintain them. We actually, instead of bidding out to redo our roads, we actually do them in-house. And then the things that we can't do in-house, then we do bid those out, but we always try to make sure that we get the best deal. We put everything out for bid. The fire station, that's being constructed right now. We actually changed the construction of the fire station so that it can actually be built less expensively. And we have to value engineer things. We have to make sure that, I will tell you that if I have to cut the budget, which I have, and it's hard to say this without offending people, but when I cut the budget, there are certain trainings that our employees are mandated by the state and federal government that they have to take. But there are, leadership trainings or this training or that training that's not necessarily necessary. It'd be good for them to have. But when I cut a budget, the first thing that I'm going to cut is most likely training, if it's not mandated, or I'm going to cut flowers because we don't need them to exist, but or I'm going to reduce, hours on the library because we don't need those to function, because everybody carries one of these. But it's not to diminish the library because they're an important piece of our community. But what do we need to thrive? We need good roads to get to work because we all have bills to pay and we have to get there. We need to make sure that the water is flowing. We need to make sure that our pipes are in good shape, and if we've got a water main break and what have you. If we've got bad guys running the street, we need to make sure that our officer squad cars get them where they need to be. If your house is on fire, I need to make sure that the fire department, when they leave that station, their fire trucks start so they can go put your fire out. We need to make sure that we're all doing our part, and we do look at every single penny that goes through. Now, granted, there are things that slip through the cracks and we find them. But yeah, when we cut the budget, we have to cut the fun things. And then they're like, why are you cutting the fun things? Because I pay taxes. So there is this thing that we do. But those are some of the things that we're going through.
Are you open to suggestions?
Absolutely.
Like I said, I've lived here since 1983, and I've observed things that I think.
Hey, Mary, can you come to the microphone?
Yeah.
Because we are taping so that,
Okay.
because we only have a handful of people
Absolutely.
here.
So if I have a suggestion of something that I've observed over the years, and how do I present it to you? When is the best time to do that?
Well, if there's something in operations,
Yeah.
you can actually call my office and I will listen to you.
Okay.
And you can set
So
up a
you
meeting.
will actually nickel and dime if it's something that I see that, because
Sure.
just like you, my husband and I are retired.
Uh-huh.
We have to make do.
Yeah.
Our taxes have doubled since we moved here. I love this community, but I want my grandkids to want to stay here.
Yeah.
Okay, so guys, we have to figure this out. So please be open to, and don't
Yeah.
say, oh, well, that's just this much, or, somebody else is paying for that, so well, we don't really care about that. So I will come to your office and talk to you about it.
So I actually, this lady up front, I had a citizen come in. I just overheard the conversation. I don't know what she was talking about. Well, I sort of know what she was talking about. She was talking about the trash cans downtown. And that's all I really heard. I heard a snippet, and she's in this room. I'm going to speak for you and what my assumption is. But I can honestly tell you that, they talk about the amount of trash cans that we have, that we need to have more. That, we have, the trash being picked up because we want a clean city. And, believe it or not, that a lot of cities have these trash can containers that the trash cans fit in. Those are literally $1,000 a piece. And so the city has gone around and gotten either free or $10 plastic 65-gallon drums for $15.
Right.
And then they dump those.
Good.
Well, I would rather see the $15. They don't look as pretty. They don't look as nice.
Yeah,
but they do the job.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I was raised on a farm in western Kansas, so I understand what frugality is and does it do the job and how do we get it. But those are the sorts of ideas. But we do get pushback by going, that doesn't look nice. I don't want that in my city. And then we have to move a different direction. So we try to find that middle ground. I need to make sure that, for instance, the street department, they have a 25-year-old front end loader. That front end loader is $350,000. The last winter that we had the big storm, the Snowmageddon, he was plowing the runway with that, and it died on the runway. And he had to leave it there, and then we had to go get it. And it ended up costing us, I think it was $15,000 to get it running again. The repairs that we do, it's about $20,000 a year just to repair it. So now it's where we have to think about, we need to buy a new piece of machinery, $350,000 to replace that, and we may trade this old one in, we may use it for a spare, but then there's that reliability piece, because can you imagine that if we didn't have caution lights and a plane came in and hit that on the runway? You know, those are the sorts of things that these men and women go out in the middle of the night that they do, and they're risking their lives and doing whatever they can to keep us safe. And so those are the things that I want to hear about.
Yeah, I'd like to comment.
Yeah.
So Mary, one other, I'll just make a couple comments. I think our departments are really good about sharing equipment. They do help each other out, so not everybody has the same piece of equipment. They are sharing.
Good.
I want to mention, he alluded to it a little bit, but the street department, you know, we used to bid out a lot of the streets that are just right here in smaller portions in downtown. Now our street department will do that themselves. And if the gutters are, if the curb and gutters are in good shape, they'll leave those. They won't knock those out. They'll take out the bad cement in the middle and fill that in. That's all stuff we used to bid out, and that's not being bid out anymore.
Good,
Our
good.
street department is doing that.
Make a comment about the suggestion that the streets department might take down some demolishing of homes if we can get to that point with our insurance company.
Yeah.
So there are challenges there.
Yep, that's possibly.
I think it'd be valuable too to have a place that we could go and see what you are doing, and also that I really would like to give some input from years of observation.
Yeah, great. Sometimes I have heard a complaint about, well, there's too many people standing around doing nothing. Well, you know, there are, you might, like on a street department situation, you might see 2 or 3 guys who appear to be standing around, but also there's safety issues that just one person necessarily can't go out and do that job. There has to be multiple people there. So the other thing that I would like to mention is, you know, from time to time, the city looks at salaries compared to other cities our size. We are not leading and bleeding that charge, I can tell you that. We are usually in the middle or a little below that. So, you know, we do like to pay our people because we want them to be happy and stay here. But I don't know of anybody that's at a top of a range. So
Yeah, I'm more on a practical, just everyday things that I think it's just that snowball effect of a little bit here and a little bit there, and then pretty soon we can get.
Yeah. The other thing is we do
better
have
place.
many people who are wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
You know, like we don't have a custodian at Park and Rec. We have, you know, we have employees that are cleaning.
Well, the other thing I thought of is, you know, there's a lot of people my age that are retired, still in very good health, and want to see the quality of life here continue to increase and stay or even get better. And maybe there might be a way to bring them in to help instead of always having to hire. Like this, I thought of this at the rec center.
Yep.
When you go there, it's pretty perturbing that the water fountain hasn't worked for several years. So maybe there might be people in the community that have these skills that could sign some type of waiver, and we start something where we put we have retired farmers, they know everything.
Yeah.
Let us help. So if there's a way that that can be
we
done.
appreciate that.
I think that could.
Appreciate that. Yeah,
That's
so
a lot
please
of-
follow
lot
up
of
with Doug.
hours.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. Appreciate it. Anyone else want to speak? Yes, Marcian?
Good afternoon. I'm Marshann Roth Campbell now. And one of the things that's bothering me, school is asking for 77 cents per thousand extra. You're asking for 90 cents. Haven't even gotten what the rest of the world is going, but basically the state is coming out and saying we're trying to drop property taxes, and everyone is trying to bring theirs, take that 10% and put it in their pocket. I'm concerned. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, and somebody's got to slow it down. You've got a 20% increase.
No, we don't have a 20% increase.
That was on the chart.
Yes, but that's a hypothetical.
Okay.
Yeah, this one,
But-
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so even a 10% increase.
Yeah.
I think you said you were doing 5 instead of
5%, yeah.
Okay, so that'd be a 10% increase
Yeah.
on top of everybody else. It comes out, you're forcing some elderly people
Yeah.
to either leave or who knows what they're going to do.
Yeah. And Marcianne, I can appreciate what you're saying, and I think one of the things that we're trying to do is grow the city, and so that tax can be spread out more. That's why we're doing housing projects. That's why we're trying to do infill lots. That's why we tried to do, we signed up with Alliant and we have a contract to put in a solar array. Now they've pushed that contract back out a couple years. So that would bring about 60,000 into the city if we get that array built. So that would be income to the city. But we don't have control over that. It's their project. It's probably been about 3 years ago, we applied for a grant to put solar on the Park and Rec. We didn't get the grant. So we're always looking at opportunities to save money, and what new things do we have an opportunity like the solar array with Alliant to bring some additional dollars in. So we're constantly looking at those things. But the biggest thing we can do is grow by commercial properties and these housing. So,
Just saying.
yep, appreciate it. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Pat, and I've lived here for about 12 years, and I always thought that I was basically a fairly intelligent person, but then this year I decided to try to understand property taxes and how they work, and it's really mind-boggling. So I went to the assessor's office, and what they told me is that when we get our tax bills in September of 2025, the assessed value of all our properties is not going to go up. But then the bill that we get in 2026, every single, I don't know about business, but all the residentials are going up between 10 and 20% based on where you live. So I was thinking I've been to, this is my 3rd meeting, and I really would like to suggest that you guys all get together, the school meeting, the county meeting, the city meeting, and have it in a place that's bigger than this, where you can put your budgets up on big screens, go through the line, and explain it to us how it works, because we as citizens have to go to all these different meetings, and one place says, well, I don't know anything about that. I only know about the assessed value. I know nothing about the levies. And then you go to another meeting and they say, well, we don't know anything about that. And by the end, you're like, how are you supposed to understand this? So I really feel like communication could be improved by having one meeting with all of you together and all the different factions, so we can ask our questions in one big city community meeting, maybe even in the Civic Center or something.
Yeah. So we do have a meeting planned on April 14th.
I heard about that.
Where we will go line by line, and you'll hear from our department heads about what's in their budget.
Yeah.
And that's a several-hour meeting, and that's just for the city.
Right.
So
it was just my suggestion
yes,
on communication,
and it's a fair
because
suggestion.
it's very confusing for us.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a side that really wasn't why I came to this meeting.
Right.
But I would like to address that, these increases that Doug mentioned, we all have those increases ourselves. And it's reached a point where we can't handle our increases plus the city's increases. it really has come to that point for many people that, you know, we just don't have big pockets anymore, you know. So I really do think that difficult decisions need to be made. We have to make difficult decisions, but we can no longer continue to just absorb all of your increases in insurance and our own. It's not sustainable. I don't know exactly what the solutions are, except to tell you that I think it's going to take a lot of change, a lot of creative thinking, because it's not as sustainable going forward. And your solution of saying we're going to grow Fairfield, well, in reality, Fairfield is decreasing in population. Students are decreasing. And even if you have a housing project, a lot of times you have to give away property taxes for so many years just to get that project going that you don't see any benefit right away. So, and I see businesses closing. So I just feel it's more of a contraction time. We'd all love it to be the old, but in reality it may not be that. And that's going to put continued pressure on the citizens here, and people may leave. And then the problem will get worse. So I'm just saying, we don't expect you to have all the answers. I think we could have more meetings, more communication. People can contribute their ideas. For example, I had the idea, well, what if you can't afford your property tax? Well, instead of paying it, could you work it off for the city? You know, could we give credits for people who rather work than pay property tax? Maybe we wouldn't have to hire as many, you know, people. And if your neighbor, if you're friends with someone who can't pay theirs, maybe you could work theirs off too. You know, I just think, I'm not saying we have to think outside the box, because this status quo of this, we're going to just keep climbing this ladder, it's going to, I think if we face it more head on rather than think this is sustainable, I think it'd be better for the community than just continuing on this road. And specifically on your budgets, you know I am going to come to that meeting, but what I saw is you're going to increase the police force from 10 full-time to basically 15 full-time by 2026. That's a 50% increase in the number.
So just to give you a little history.
10, it's going to go up to 15.
It does sound like that. But to give you a little history, we have authorized 15 officers for several years, but we have had trouble hiring them.
Oh.
So we have not been at full staff. In a perfect world, we'd have 15 officers. But we've had, you know, it's been more in the 10 to 12 range.
Okay.
So we've saved tax dollars just by that alone. Yeah. Again, that 15 is authorized, but we've had trouble getting there. We've had people move on to other departments. And so one question that I would have is to the community to really think hard of what services you wouldn't want the city to have.
Yeah. I
So
think
for
we're all
example,
going to have to get together and say.
So for example, I'm just going to throw this out here. You know, so we do have a very nice park and recreation department. It's great. I don't think anybody wants it to go away, and that's what the city council is trying to balance. Our actual needs of, we need a police department, we need a fire department, we need street, we need to deliver water to you, we need to take away the sewer. You know, all those things are absolute needs.
Well, you mentioned,
would the world go away if we shut the public library? Would the world go away if we shut Park and Rec?
Know. I'm just saying as a group, we're going to have to really decide this because it's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Park and Recs. Well, does anyone here know how many visits Park and Rec gets in a year?
Yes.
She does.
I mean, I'd have to look it up, but I have it on my computer.
Yeah.
How many?
Yeah. So we do, and you know,
It's huge.
It's
and you
important.
mentioned they don't have a gentle. Well, I can't tell you how many times my friends say, I want to go there with a bucket full of, it's not being cleaned properly, you know, and we want to go there and scrub because it's not clean enough for us. But I know they're trying to save money, but really, that Park and Rec is such a huge benefit to this community that I almost feel like you should invest more in that so we don't have to smell sewer gas when we go in the showers and feel like we're going to puke. You know, it's just, I'm just saying as a group, you're not alone. This is not we're all in this. It's our
Yeah.
city. And just like as individuals, we have to make tough decisions sometimes. We can't have everything we want.
Yeah, and I would really encourage people also to come to the Ways and Means Committee when they're going through the budget, because they are making tough decisions.
Yeah,
you know,
it's
during
not
those
easy to
periods.
make them on a city level or a personal level.
Yep,
you know.
you're right.
And like, for example, the police thing you mentioned, I ask around, I say, well, is there a lot of crime here? Well, mostly I hear stuff is being stolen, they never get it back, you know, and stuff like that. And well, maybe we could do more education. Instead of adding more police, why can't we have citywide education on what is the best security cameras to get? Where do you put them? Could we have security camera like there demonstrating, or, you know, how do we protect our property? Do more education. And the same with fire. Maybe we don't need as much. Maybe we should all take a fire prevention for our properties. You know, I don't know how to work a sprayer, or they have the blankets now. Maybe if we all took more classes on things like that, maybe we could have lower property taxes if we're, you know, more, you know, it's almost like it's an emphasis on how to have less fires, how to have less theft, how to protect yourself better. I'm just, you know, maybe we
Yep.
could do more outreach like that. So that's really why I was here, is just to say, you know, no one's saying you're not doing a good job, but like I work in business, and if we do a 5%, like let's say we got to cut staff by 5%, guess what? All the work still gets done because people become more efficient at doing it, or, you know, they spread it around. And so there's always room to cut the budgets, and business has to do it all the time.
I mean, we have done that when somebody has left us. We have not rehired. But go ahead, Doug.
And the last question I have is, one thing I heard is that some people are trying to get Fairfield to win a contest, and if we win the contest, we have to guarantee to pay $75,000 a year for 3 years to manage the town square. Is that true?
So that is the Main Street program.
Yeah, but is that what
And-
we'd have to pay?
Well, that's a program from the state, and they want you to see that you can start out for the first 3 years, $75,000 a year to run the program. Okay? So that's all privately raised.
It's not the city paying it?
No. The city has committed to 15,000
Okay.
as a portion. Okay? So just a very small portion, which is coming out of local option sales tax.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
and
manage
so-
the square.
If you get that designation, you get access to a lot of state support and federal support and
okay.
grants that would help revitalize our downtown. And so that's the ultimate goal.
Well, that's what I mean. I think like there's more discussion. Like when I heard that, I went, is this the right time, the city to pay 75?
Yeah, no. So
But-
we're privately raising that. In fact, there are pledge forms if anybody wants to participate in that.
And-
Because individuals can participate. It's not, you know, I mean,
Okay.
even $50, $100, you know, whatever you want. Individuals
thanks-
could participate in that
Thanks
as
for
well.
explaining that. And making the city more welcome, I noticed one thing that the city does is, like I like to garden. Well, the city is, if you try to grow your own food and you have to put up maybe a little hoop house because of this climate, you know, they're going to increase your property taxes. Let's say you need a little shed to put some of your garden tools in. You're going to pay more in property taxes. And I just feel like the minuscule amounts that these little structures might create in property tax, if you have the right to do away with that and not tax people on anything to do with growing food, I think it would make a more welcoming place, and it would let people know that you encourage them to garden, and they can garden in their front yard, their backyard, their side yard. They're not going to be afraid to put up a little hoop house because, you know,
A hoop house should not increase your taxes.
It does.
It shouldn't.
Anything will increase the taxes.
Yeah.
You just,
And there's been also somebody told me years ago if they didn't want to paint their house because their taxes would go up. Now that's not accurate either.
well, I don't know about painting a house.
So
but
I just
do
want to
know
make sure that if you
that they
want your
say
house to be painted.
You can't garden in your front yard, and if you put up a little hoop house, or let's say a tiny little greenhouse, whatever it is,
Yeah.
that you are going to be increasing tax. So I'm just saying those small things like that is not going to give you the revenue you need anyway,
Yeah.
and it might just make people feel more welcome.
And the city doesn't assess, the county does.
Right, we can't control.
We don't
Well,
get to
then
assess
that's
it.
why I'm saying we all should get together, the
Right.
county, the city, the
Right.
schools, because it's
Yeah.
one or
Yes,
the
ma'am.
other.
Melanie?
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes, please.
So we do allow front yard gardening. The only thing that we prohibit is in the right of way. So that's the area between the property line and the back of the curb, or the sidewalk and the back of the curb. There is a lot of people assume that we prohibit front yard gardening because we don't allow fences over 3 feet. I understand we in the front yard. I understand we have a lot of deer population, and so some people might see that as a 3-foot fence isn't going to help anything. I can't stop the deer, and really, is even a 6-foot fence going to stop the deer? So in your backyard, but we do not prohibit front yard gardening as long as it doesn't cause a sight distance. If 15 feet back, if you're on the corner, there are some regulations. As far as greenhouses, we have had some people want to put greenhouses in their front yard. Front yard accessory structures are not allowed. Backyard, they're more than welcome. Our maximum building permit is $150 or $125, and you would have to build a $500,000 greenhouse in order for that to apply. So most greenhouses are going to be in about a $15 range. If the council wanted to start waiving that to encourage them, that would be fine. But that is something that we do get complaints in planning and zoning a lot, is because greenhouses do have to be on a certain side of the house in order for them to be maximum sun. But detached accessory buildings can't be in the front of the house. So, it's kind of just one of those that perception, or maybe some misinformation on that with our regulations. And planning and zoning department, we're always willing to go through that with people.
Thank you. Doug, were you going to make a comment?
I just remember that a few years ago, we had an efficiency expert approach the city, and she went through every line and every expense that she could find because she got paid based on how much savings she discovered. So the city has taken serious approaches in the past to improve efficiencies and look for ways to that sort of thing. And maybe it's time to do that again. I don't know, but
Can we see the results of that, Doug? That would be.
we probably have a report somewhere.
I would just like to mention also that we are, I would say, in the next year or two, as this fire station gets built, we're going to have a building, right, the old fire station, that will be available. Doug and I are regularly talking. We haven't talked about this at the council yet, but I do foresee in the next year to 2 years, probably 3 years the max, this council is going to have to really discuss the city-owned buildings, because we're a little bit bursting at the seams here, and I would really, I'm speaking personally here, I would really like to see the city condense the number of buildings that they own and get at least one back on the city rolls. We have the old Roosevelt building that's not being utilized to its capacity, and I think we need to think hard about what's the use of that building, the current use and the future use, and really discuss seriously, again, what that is. Is that a new city hall? Would that help us? Give us more room over there? We fix that building up and we sell this one. We sell the old fire station, or is there still a need for that? So I think those are the conversations we're going to be having over the next, couple of years, and serious conversations, again, to lower our cost. Yes, Melanie, and then Robin, I'll get you.
Doug Florner, I appreciate you bringing up that efficiency expert. I actually don't think we have a report because she found so little to report on. We can find the council. Hopefully, maybe Jason can help us find the council meeting that she reported on, because she was extremely impressed in how little she was able to find. For everyone listening and to remind the council, some of the different things that we do or that our departments do, signing contracts for chemicals a year in advance in order to lock in prices. The water department, sewer department, and Park and Rec does that. I think, remember, maybe it was last year, the pool was open several days after Labor Day because they wanted to use up the rest of the chemical at the end of the season. But that's because Calvin purchases that chemical almost 6 months in advance before we even know what the summer is going to look like. But he does that in order to lock in the price. So those were the types of things that the efficiency expert was looking at that we were they were already doing before she had came. But we'll look for that meeting. Like I said, I don't think there was a report, but I know that she did present to council a couple different times, and we'll find those meetings. So.
Okay, great.
Melanie knows everything that's going on in the city.
I don't, but I do have a memory for some of those things. I also remember because she had really long nails, and she would tap them on the dais. So Jason probably remembers the meeting too, because she was, because he was probably like, "Stop tapping on the microphone." But we'll see what we can find.
Yeah. Okay. Robin.
My name's Robin Frick, 4th Ward. I was surprised at a comment you made. We had a efficiency expert. Maybe we should do that again. And I thought, why'd you ever stop? Mr. Gandy, you made and Mr. Flournoy, no, you're Mr. Reiner. You men made comments about, well, it's only a 5%, it's only an example, it's only I've never known any government to get it, whether it's a temporary power or a temporary funding, and ever give it back. So when you go, well, it's not a good example, probably a pretty good example for what ultimately happens down the road. Unfortunately, you're where the rubber meets the road, and it's not a problem completely of your making. And I know you like to think that, well, we don't want to do anything nationally, we don't want to do anything, but you don't operate in a vacuum. When our dollar buys 93 cents less than what it did 50 years ago, that's a big hit for what happens with my property taxes. I've got people that are, I call it malfeasance, and they're operating and running our money supply, and yet the worth of it keeps going down, which bumps to another level, bumps down, bumps down, bumps down. When I spoke to people at coffee this morning, they said, "Oh, really, going for taxes, huh? Why don't you ask them about the $140,000 to $200,000 bridge at Walton? Why don't you ask them what that's for?" They said it's for emergency vehicles, but you know, off that gravel road you got access, off that gravel road you got access, off that one you got access. Who are they really building it for? Haven't heard anything about it. This was the first I'd ever heard it anyway. Is there really a $140,000 to $200,000 bridge going out there? Who's it benefiting? Why? If you have access to emergency vehicles off of gravel roads, what's this buying you? As to continually growing out of a problem, I've heard this for 50, 60 years now. And the truth is, you cannot have infinite growth in a finite system. And we're in a finite system. You can't grow your way out of it continuously. On another area of waste, you folks have an issue budding right now that's either going to be wasteful in time, because it's going to take your attention, and or you're going to have to put more money at it. It's a project that just got started, and the very fact that there's issues this early on with the project is interesting. The firehouse, okay? At some point in time, I think you realize your trajectory is not sustainable. You talk about making Fairfield friendly. You ever try to back out of a parking spot downtown? You ever try to cross a crosswalk? Anybody here, can anybody here explain Iowa Code 320.325? Wouldn't know anybody knew what it was. It's conducting crosswalks. It's as if, oh, there was a puppet, let's go hit him. It's ridiculous, you know. I don't think Fairfield, as much as I love the people here, and the people are quite friendly, you put people in a car, and it's one of the most unfriendly places you can get, especially downtown. How are you going to grow it? Why would I come downtown? You know, if I could walk, that'd be great, but these are just all things to ponder. And as the woman before me said, what are you going to do when you no longer have a population base to draw upon? And the fact is, throughout Western civilizations right now, it's a population decline. France, Spain, Germany, Japan, England, US. We're not keeping up with our birth rates and death rates. We're declining. What are you going to do? More infinite growth in a finite system?
You're going to have to marry a young woman, Robin.
And you think you got problems. Single for a reason. Anyway, I feel for you, but you know, the very fact that we've lost 93 cents purchasing power from our dollar doesn't bode well for the fact that, okay, now we're going to have a dollar. Well, gee, that's 300% more than what the dollar itself on the piece of linen's even worth. And when that goes, and it's only trust that's backing that, you agree and I agree that it's got some intrinsic value when it has zero. It's a piece of, you know, I feel for you, but these folks and all of us do have real questions. My gas goes up, my insurance goes up. You know, UPS is in the business. They know they had to buy trucks, and yet when gasoline goes up, they have the audacity to turn to me and go, you make our business model successful. Yeah, thanks. Now who's going to come around to me and make my business model successful, which is called survival?
Yeah.
Anyway, feel for you guys, and don't know what the answer is, and I'm willing to pick up a shovel. That was a good idea there, you know, with some of the things, but I am interested in this $140,000 to $200,000 bridge.
It's a fair question. I think it's a fair question.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
my name is mentioned, so I got to say something.
Yeah.
I think when we were talking, Mr. Frick, about taxes, there wasn't anything, we were not diminishing the amount that the increase, we're not diminishing, and at least I wasn't, I don't think Doug was either. We're making a comparison to what the actual increase will be compared to what the hypothetical is. So we just want to be clear, because I think maybe the information sent out in the statement is a bit confusing to citizens. I know it has been, well, I know it was for me. The actual increase in taxes, the actual increase in levy is significantly less than what the hypothetical is. That's what we're trying to make clear to the public.
As if that's important.
It is important because we're talking about 5.8%.
I'm going to write a bigger check, and I'm going to send it in.
But the difference between 5.8%
every year I'm going,
and 20% is quite
that's
significant.
trifling. It's going to cost me more money that I don't have, and so you're making my point for me. You think that it's only 5% versus 10%.
I didn't say only.
It's more money out of my pocket,
Yes,
but
but
we
it's
don't necessarily see what we're getting for it. And there's one hand. It's almost like the pea in the walnut shells. All I know is I may have a even chance at it, but the fact is money's going to go from my side to your side, and they're going to call it a fair game, and it's anything but. Between the assessors, the legislature, the people who spend it, the end result is more comes out of our pocket with no end in sight till when she got there, the cupboard was bare. And then you're in a fix.
So Melanie is going to talk a little bit about the bridge. That's not really a bridge.
Yeah.
Right?
So I really appreciate the comments about how far a dollar goes, because I've said for all the time that I've been employed with you guys that the way our streets have been funded have not been the same, that our tax system has never been set up to fund our streets. The way that things were done when most of our streets were paved, 50% of those streets were assessed directly to the adjacent property owners. And so then you put replacing those streets on top of the fact that our streets, or that the dollar doesn't go as far, our maintenance of our streets are struggle. I bring that up because the way that we do things today and the way that our government operates today is not the way that it operated 50 years ago or 20 years ago. And the Walton Lake situation is unfortunately something that this council has to deal with, of maybe what I would say is a sin of the past. It is a contract that the past council signed with the lessee of Walton Lake, who at this time is the Walton Golf and Country Club. saying that the city is responsible for replacing all bridges and structures out at Walton Lake. And I would say I would not advise the council to sign something like this today, but that was not what was signed 40 years ago or whatever time that was signed. And so to honor that contract, the city is, I guess, honoring that contract and replacing the golf cart access bridge across that finger with, instead of a bridge that has a 50-year life, replacing it with, oh gosh, and I'm sorry.
Causeway.
Well, a causeway is the name, but I was going to say six culverts. I was trying to decide if it was 6 or 7, so forgive me on the number of pipes. But they're replacing the bridge with the culverts and then an earth dam over those pipes. And so it creates a causeway rather than a bridge. And so even though maybe we don't like what the contract says, that we're obligated to due to things that are beyond our control, that were agreed to by people who were before us, it does have benefits to the city in the long term, given that a causeway is going to have a longer life than a bridge. And that's where the emergency services, that yes, to his point, there are other ways to bring emergency services across. But the reason why I had, brought that up in the council meeting is that a causeway is cheaper, and that is what we've said all along, is that the causeway is going to be cheaper than a bridge. And it still is, even with the increased cost, not the increased cost, the change from the preliminary estimate of 140 to the 200. Final engineer's estimate of 200, and then the bids came in at 197, I believe. But despite those changes, we still strongly believe that the causeway is the lowest cost option compared to a bridge. Obviously, the lowest cost option is doing nothing. But we feel that, we've been advised, we feel that the obligation to the city is to honor that contract that was signed before, I think, any of us were participating.
The alternative to doing nothing is to redirect the cart traffic down a dangerous path to the golf course if they redesign the layout of the golf course.
Yes, if they redesign the layout, you would push the golf carts out onto Walton Road, which would require that road to be widened, and then extending the box culvert that is under Walton Road, which would be more expensive. A preliminary estimate was done on that, and that was at like 210 at the preliminary estimate time. So other than the fact that it's still more than what the bids came in at, it also has a very high safety concern by putting the golf carts out there. So
the point being, we did look at alternatives to this, replacing this culvert or bridge that we're currently buying. We didn't just decide to replace it, we looked at alternatives to find the cheapest approach to solving the problem.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And that's how we do things.
Yeah. John, did you have a comment?
Well, the road
Wasn't
is
sure.
complicated too because it's shared with the county.
Yeah, I know there would be a lot of complications if we went that way.
If you're going to build a way in from off the road instead of doing it as a self-contained entry onto Green 1 from the course, I know what the insurance company wants you to do is be self-contained inside the perimeters of your leasehold, and that's always controlled. So aside from, the lease may not be what we would renegotiate today,
Right.
They've always had a long time arrangement out there, and nobody wants to go over an unsafe bridge. The culvert's the pragmatic thing at the moment compared to getting into some other deals where you involve the county and DOT on something that will probably have more costs than you guess.
Correct. Yep.
And another more subtle point is you want Fairfield to grow and be an attractive city, right? So you have to provide certain kinds of amenities to the community, people who might want to move here, people who live here already. And one of those might be golf courses, one that anyone can join, for example. So It's not just building a bridge or not building a bridge.
So what I've heard is,
Robin, come to the microphone, please.
I haven't heard a thing of how we could get it done. I've heard, well, people before us committed, so we're going to spend the money, and here, this is why we have to spend the money. Nowhere did I hear, you can turn it into a walking course. That takes care of your golf carts.
You still got to
Okay.
build a bridge.
I'd think a path, I mean, $200,000, come on, really. The school has got the same rationale. Well, it was people in the 50s that made this decision, but yet you want to be rewarded for it today. At some point in time, we're asking you to go, yeah, you know what? That's the way it was. I mean, you could always condemn the golf course and turn it into a big park or something, then you don't have the problem of the bridge, turn it into a big lake. There's any number of creative things you can do, but the fact is, people want to go down this road to that goal with the same people involved. And what you say to us is, well, just spend the money, spend the money, spend the money, because here's the reason why, here's the reason why, here's the reason why, and these are the reasons why we can't honor your savings of money. And at some point in time, we look at you folks and go, really? Well, you got your hand out. You're trying to do a difficult job, but when it comes to money, we're now talking about a sensitive thing. And you go from being citizens to you're them, because you're the ones who want the money. It's not an enviable position, but I don't know how you can extricate yourself from it. You really think that having that culvert out there is going to make a decision for people at their dinner table going, by golly gee, I'm moving to Fairfield, Iowa because they put in 6 culverts. I don't think that's why they would.
Yeah. We've
Someone
had-
might do that, but
Not sure I want them for my neighbor.
No, you talked already. So when I drove through town and decided where I wanted to live, I looked at Fairfield's, the look and feel of this town when I drove through the town, and the eclectic nature of the community was attractive to me. I found a house in the right spot, the right price also, but it wasn't just whatever you would make your decision on, right?
You always shake your finger at somebody.
Huh? No, I'm not shaking my finger at you.
You did.
No, I did not.
Yeah, you did.
All right, I'm not going to argue about something like that. That's silly. But if you want to close down the golf course, the Walton Golf Club, okay, you could do that. You could close down Park and Rec. You could, not have the gazebo functioning properly downtown. You could do all those things. But what is Fairfield going to look like when you're finished? Is it going to be something that someone wants to move to, raise their family? Is it going to attract new people to town? I don't think so.
Just on the surface of things, this is what happened with the Jefferson County supervisors. The first thing he comes out of the supervisor's mouth is, well, I can take a deputy away from you. You have 0 fat, so right where you go to is a safety issue. You go to a beautification issue. You say you have 0 fat, so we can take your gazebo away, we can take your golf course away, we can take your park and recs away. So then I sit here as a taxpayer going, well, look at that. He got the cudgel out. He put the carrot away, but he sure knows how to reach for that cudgel. Why is it that you think in these binary terms? There's got to be all kinds of different ways for saving money, saving beautification of the city, keeping safety going on. You're the creative ones. You wanted this job.
You know why that gentleman told you we cut a deputy? Because in most institutions like this one, ours probably too, I don't know the exact number, but school district I know it is, salaries are about 80% of your budget. And if you want to make serious, and then there's another 5 or 10% that is obligated, utilities and that sort of thing. If you want to cut your budget seriously, you're going to cut people. So Tommy Thompson used to say, here, I'll line up all the city employees and you tell me which one we want to get rid of. Or how many 3 or 4 that you want to get rid of.
You ran for the job, pick the ones.
Well, like I did when I was on the school board, I don't want to fire people if I don't have to. If I can avoid it, we did our best to, in this kind of a situation, to maintain the breadth and the depth of course offerings at the school district when we were in tough problems. That required tough cuts and tough decisions. Well, Fairfield City, we want to maintain the breadth of offerings. We want to maintain beautification. We want Fairfield to be an attractive location to move to. Because we're competing
ultimately
with
the cuts are us.
Huh?
Ultimately the ones that decide the cuts are us. At the point in time where you create a situation so untenable that it means losing your house, moving out of Fairfield, because we can't come up with the property taxes, then the population will make the cuts.
That might
So,
happen.
and we can go back and forth all day on that issue. And so my ask of you is to speak privately with your council member. Come speak to Doug, come speak to myself, and really tell me, where would you, if you were sitting in their shoes, because I don't have a vote, where would you tell these people to cut?
I texted my council member 2 weeks ago, how do we get in contact with you as a council member? Still waiting for his answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Otherwise, it's a good idea.
Yep. John.
Let me mention a couple things that aren't getting discussed, but that it's nice to see this many people turn out, because sometimes we have 2 or 3, and everybody's got good comments. But there are things that are part of the taxing system. This council is the bottom level in. We are blessed with home rule, supposedly. However, the legislature reserved to itself everything that has to do with taxation. So if you think rollbacks aren't controlled by the legislature, you need to go talk to your legislators. That's where it all starts. About 10 years ago, we had rollbacks here in town because there was almost an uprising between commercial and industrial. They didn't have the kinds of percent rollbacks that residential got and that rural got. And there wasn't anything unfair about the rollbacks that residential and rural got, but industrial and commercial, their taxes were about twice what you would have imagined in other states or other communities. So the legislature rolled them back, but then the city, again, because the legislature controls the taxing rules, we're going to be missing that revenue for the part of the rollbacks on valuation that the legislature said, okay, roll it back. They came up with backfill. We were supposed to get replacement money from the legislature to cover the amounts that our budget was then impinged on by the rollbacks. That stopped. Part of it was COVID, but they haven't restored backfills to us unless somebody forgot to tell us. We haven't got any backfill since then, have we, Doug?
It's dwindling. I think the last year, it dwindles every year. And I have to look, but I think
it's nothing like it was.
But it ends in 2027.
Planned. But the place where you want to talk is your legislators, your representatives and senators about the system and what doesn't happen in the system. How many of you have ever gone to a board of review in the assessor's office and asked to have your property assessment from that spring reviewed? Have some of you done that? Okay, I see a few hands. That's democracy in action, because that system works. I was county attorney for about 18 years in one way or another in 3 different decades, and I know one year we had 169 board of review appeals take place between May and the end of June. And those things, they're your own citizens sitting on that board of review along with the assessor, and you do get some relief. I've seen some people have their assessments almost completely unchanged as a result of going to the board of review. But what happens with the board of review, again, you're back to Des Moines. The board of review, the Department of Revenue, the state auditor's office, they all check in with the legislature, and if it looks like things are happening back home to the extent that people are really getting relief, then the legislature, and I'm not calling the legislature cruel, but it's a cruel result, they turn around and they expect the Department of Revenue and the state auditor to order out an equalization order. And this county at that point, they get that equalization order, and you're going to get increases in your assessment every time there's an equalization order. And again, that's something that can be appealed, but it's usually about 6 months behind the time as far as when that's happening. I know Jefferson County back in the 70s and 80s did 2 appeals to the state for the equalization order that was dumped on them then. And we had to hire economic PhDs to be on our side of the fight. The state had them on board in their offices. We had district court in Des Moines, and we had administrative hearings before district court and so forth. So this stuff doesn't happen without a few months of that kind of bickering first. But there are some things that are supposed to be relief valves, and appealing an equalization order is one of them also. So those things are really beyond the city council's control, though. Those things all happen from afar, and then we're down here, and the latest thing for this council is House File 718, which takes money out of our reserves every year. You, as taxpayers, if you're worried about a big bite someday again because this thing gradually gets into things, watch our reserves disappear completely because of House File 718, and then after they've disappeared, Moody Company, the bond rating company, is going to come in and re-rate us back down. We got the best rating we could get a few years ago. Our city administrator refinanced most of our long-term debt, and we've got some big long-term debt. We got the best kind of extensions on long-term debt for our water and sewer programs. That's going to help you for the next 50 to 100 years as far as that infrastructure. But what's going to help you also is the refinancing, because of our new bond ratings, saved us about $1 million in long-term interest. That makes a lot more difference than anything the legislature is going to do year to year. So those kinds of things are in one bite making more difference than what you've got going on any year as far as these kinds of conversations. We still want you to come and have a conversation with us every year, but those other things, when we can report that something like that has happened, we're very happy to report it. The rest of the story, though, is the legislature isn't done with us. They're still going to mess around this year. They're not telling the public the whole story. There's still money up there to be spent between now and 2027 that is old recovery money. There's programs that have gone out of existence in this community and counties all over southern Iowa because they aren't spending out the recovery money. They're sitting on a budget surplus that they're bragging about, but it ain't their money. It's leftover federal money. And it's the same way with the infrastructure money. Ask Melanie if she doesn't know that there's some more infrastructure money, but it's very hard to shake it loose. Those are things that could help communities like us, but again, it's up to senators and representatives up in Des Moines, not down here. So when we sit here and we do these things for the good of the public order, to give you a chance to say how frustrating this is, believe you me, we are just as frustrated, only it's with things that take bigger bites. And so, you know, I get it off my chest every once in a while, but as far as what you're saying, we don't agree with you. We just know that there's some other things that can be done too. When you get your assessment, review it in the springtime. That every 2 years, the assessor's got to do it whether he likes it or not. He's not under an equalization order right now, but that's right now. As far as the things the legislature is going to do, as far as tweaking things like House File 718 and so forth, they're not done. And as far as things that we can do here locally, as far as more cuts, we also have something else behind us, which is a statewide community assurance pool, which is big dollar insurance that the communities, the counties, and the cities have done to try to have insurance costs be less. And ICAP requires us to have a lot of the things that seem like, when we say public safety or security issues, that sounds like an excuse term. But believe me, if you get sued for $1 million, you start looking at ICAP a little differently, and you listen to what their requirements are. So those standards as far as community safety and so forth, they show up every year when the premium shows up, and it's something else that Ways and Means has to deal with too. So there's another side to this besides the public aired side, which has to do with the legislature and these meetings, and that's just the business side that has to do with insurance and the other things we have to deal with. But we see it every month, and we want you to feel like you can talk about it every month also. But this thing that's going to happen in 2 weeks as far as the all-morning session explaining things, I hope there's twice the crowd at least, and that there's twice the questions, because we'll be prepared to talk about them. Now, I've said my piece, and there's some things, though, that the public itself probably doesn't exercise enough. If a legislature hears that there's 169 appeals in one county for the Board of Review, they're going to look and see what was the last time the equalization order went through down there. What exactly was going on, and what kind of relief did those taxpayers get? And maybe it's time for that kind of remedy also, because we're.
So, John, I'd just like to say, this morning I did talk to Steve Wemme, our county assessor, and because it was referenced that assessments will go up, and he said sales have been very strong in Jefferson County and in Fairfield, and so that is what, again, affects your assessed valuation. If you got something that's assessed at 125 and it sells for 200,000, eventually that assessed valuation is going to go up. That's just the nature of it. And that's talking about supply and demand. That's why we are trying to get us more supply, so the demand can be lessened. Somebody's not paying up for a house. I went out, and just as it's a very small thing, but I went out on Airbnb because somebody, a friend of ours, was looking for somebody else that needs a temporary stay in Fairfield. There are close to 200 Airbnbs in Fairfield, Iowa. Some of those, many of those, are full houses, unoccupied by a family. A short-term rental for somebody to, have some tax write-off, and I'm not begrudging that. It's okay. It's an investment property for them. But, that does decrease our supply, which does then increase demand and increases prices. So all of these are intertwined. It makes it very challenging. So anyway, I'll stop there. Does anybody else want to make any more comments? Okay. Well, let's go to Ann, because I would like to wrap this up. Close the public hearing.
I just want to say, as somebody who sat through all 10 hours of deliberations at the Ways and Means Committee, that they do work really hard to try and balance the budget. And I have no qualms with that at all. I think they do a really good job. The other thing is that I think we have to stop thinking about us and them, that you all are paying taxes as well. You all are making decisions about services that are benefiting us. So I don't see that division between you and us out sitting on this side, because I think what you're trying to do is make these balanced decisions in our behalf. And I just wish that we could look at that as working together. And I also have to say that I go to council meetings and I listen and I hear what's happening, so that we don't have to make these decisions and opinions all at the budget time, but we can do that throughout the year. I feel I have full access on Ward 2 to my council member. I met with him a couple of times already on the budget and expressed my opinion. He listens, he has a dialogue with me. And so this is part of due process, and this is part of democracy. And I thank you for all the work. I don't agree with everything, all the decisions that are made, and I have some agenda items myself about the budget. But I appreciate the fact that you are looking at everything and trying to
to decide what to do in the behalf of the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Ann. So, Jennifer, you have one more comment?
Just quickly, two things. I really appreciated our city attorney's comments, and it's always been on my mind that, you know, small towns like Fairfield, we're not the only small town that's having all these same problems. And in the future, I feel like unless we band together with a lot of other small towns and figure, well, what are your problems? What are your solutions? And then those small towns go to Des Moines. It really doesn't do us any good to one person to contact our senators or whatever. You know, I feel like the city governments need to have a better presence maybe in Des Moines of these are the problems of all of your Iowa small towns. We're all experiencing the same thing. And let the legislate and tell them what you need to make your towns viable. And because I think only by banding together, and also there may be small towns that are doing things that we don't know about that are working for them. And one of the things I would like to see us pursue is this Alliant energy dependence that we have, that we have the ability to cut that cord. I know there's legislation in the works to try to make that easier for small communities, but there are small towns that have done that, and they are saving significantly on their utilities. And I think maybe that would be a good thing to pursue for this community, because this community is maybe more open to that kind of new, you know, thinking or new way of doing things. But utilities are just going through the roof too. And, you know, I think there's ways around that we should pursue. So
If you have communities that have cut the cord from a line, I'd like to hear about them. The last one I heard was
I will get you
Decorah.
some facts,
and
because there are people here that work in the solar energy field here in Fairfield that know all about this. I don't have all the details, but they've told me there's communities that are doing that.
Well, they might be putting up solar, but they haven't cut the cord from a line, I don't think.
I think so, but I will get you some facts.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Yeah, we did study that about 15 years ago. I remember Myron Gookin was still on council. It looked like it was going to cost to do a deal to get rid of Alliant somewhere between $12 and $20 million to take it over.
Yeah.
And that would be us running our own municipal utility.
Well, and we've looked at
So
it
we
even
looked at
since then,
that,
John.
and we looked at other franchisers.
Yeah.
It costs more than that.
Yeah, yeah, that's, yeah. And probably Alliant wouldn't even sell their infrastructure to us. So, at any rate, with that, I think I'm going to close the public hearing. I think everyone has spoken that wanted to. And we will move on to this resolution, which is, again, the consideration of the proposed property tax levy for fiscal year 26. And again, that levy would be at $17, basically 65 cents. So is there a motion?
Move to approve resolution.
Moved by Gandy, second by Flournoy. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Gandy?
Yes.
Flournoy?
Yes.
Ham?
Yes.
Rowe?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That was passed 4-0. Sorry we didn't have a full council here, but I think, I can't speak for them, but I do feel like, you know, we had Tom Toohill and Terry Kness, who were part of the Ways and Means budgeting process, and I think they were comfortable with where things are at. So I feel like if they were here, they would be probably voting yes. Again, I encourage people to come and talk to Doug, come and talk to myself, talk to the council members. Always up, you know, we are open for ideas. Sometimes we are hamstrung by liability, insurance issues, but hey, let's talk about other options. So I think everyone is really open for that. And so with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Ham. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Gandy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Meeting is adjourned.